learning through educational technology before it became a thing. And it's just my pleasure to be on here today as we talk about unintended consequences. And sometimes I would say those are unexpected consequences. And as we lead through this pandemic and make this large shift into distance learning, I'd like to offer first little nugget of, failing unintended consequences, known also as first attempt in learning. First attempt, iterate and lead. And that's what I'd like to offer to our teachers and to our leaders as we feel like we might have moments of failure. First attempt, iterate and lead.
Well, there you have it, which is the irony that you were on mute. So that's how that happens.
Iterate, turn on the mic and lead.
Dr. Clark, take it away, please.
Great. So first of all, I want to thank CALSA for this opportunity. I would have really enjoyed to spend some time attending the CALSA conference this summer, but I know we're all dealing with with the situation as best we can, and so I'm just so honored to be associated with CALSA and the good work that's taking place. So again, Dr. Adam Clark, current superintendent of the Mount Diablo Unified School District in the Bay Area in Northern California. Previously elementary teacher, vice principal, elementary principal, middle school principal, high school principal, assistant superintendent of student services, associate superintendent of ed services, and most recently superintendent of Vallejo City Unified School District. And I'm very excited today to talk about the current challenges that we're facing, but also many of the opportunities that are still ahead of us. So again, thank you to CALSA and my esteemed panel members.
Thank you so much. And Jeanette, to you.
Yes, well, hello everyone. I am surely just so grateful, and I cannot believe the esteemed group that I'm with today. My name is Jeanette Salinas. I'm with Orenda Education, and I've been in education, public education, for over 25 years. I actually was a part of CALSA cohort 8 leadership, leaders, yes, mentor program, and truly enjoyed it. Worked in elementary all the way up to secondary, was teachers in both those realms, and then also principal. I was a principal for 10 years. So looking forward to having the discussion today, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. Well, there you have it. I rest my case. So why don't we just launch in, Chris, shall we? Okay, so let's just launch into the discussion. Team. An equity leader's job is to ensure that the adults entrusted with the education and well-being of students are up to their responsibility. Given the changing times, changes in accountability, changes in legislation, changes in policy, testing, etc., what is the most important role for a leader in whatever position we have during this time? Let's just start off right out the gate with a big question. Dr. Clark, what would you say?
Yeah, so first of all, I think as leaders during this time, we first have to sort of take the advice that we get every time we're on an airplane about putting that oxygen mask on ourselves before we begin leading, that we really have to make sure that we're grounded in what it is that we're doing. But we have to bring a high level of calm, to those within our organizations. Everyone has experienced some form of trauma, whether it be our parents, teachers, support staff, and most importantly, our students. And so I think at this time, we just have to make sure that we're being empathetic to those around us, and just know that although we often expect everything to be laid out in front of us and to be perfect, that it's not going to be perfect at this time. And we really have to sort of create as we're moving along. So I think that's what we would want to begin with during these challenging times.
That's leadership I'd want to follow. So you're saying that we are people too?
Yes. Oftentimes they don't believe that, but we are people, and we really do set the tone. So I think if we're feeling comfortable, and if at least, we're safe within ourselves, that we can help sort of spread that.
Oh, that's beautiful. Pam, your experience is centered around small school districts with big issues often. How do you see leadership during this time? What should we be doing?
I say big issues and big opportunities as well. So if you've heard me speak before, you know that I like to refer to the fact that both in the state of California and across the United States, 55% of the school districts are small school districts of 2,500 students or less. These are also school districts that tend to have greater freedom for agility and adaptability. So that as we to Dr. Clark's comments, agility and adaptability to create, because things are going to be different. We know that every day we turn on the news and something has changed, and we're having to switch our mindset, our direction. How are we building our foundation on what we're doing this year, knowing that at the end of the grading period, things might change? So working closely in partnership with our small school districts that can maneuver, also, and then with our larger school districts who may have more resources and expertise in there. And there's something magical that can happen. And I will give a shout out to Valverde. As I was a small school district superintendent, Valverde's superintendent once had said to me, he goes, my team is your team. When you need expertise, because I know you're small, please just give us a call. And being able to do that and have that partnership, I was able to say like, ooh, this is a fantastic idea. We're going to drop it in here because we can actually do it pretty quickly, and then get feedback over there to a larger school district of here's what happens when you can shift with that agility. So there are magical partnerships just waiting to happen between the smalls and the bigs that can create systemic change that closes the equity gap, which has been phenomenally exposed
Right.
during this crisis, right? One of the greatest takeaways I would say is there was something that was kind of being hidden underneath the carpet. Some of us have known that equity gap is there, but it is out front and center right now.
It certainly is. And yes, shout out to Valverde for many, many things. Absolutely. Equity warriors at their core. Speaking of equity warriors, Dr. Hansen, let me ask you this question. We were talking right now with Pam about the equity gap and the exacerbation of that during this last few months. How do we navigate the nuances? This is not a black and white world. In this context that we're describing, there's a lot of gray. How do we navigate these nuances when we're trying to still do what's true, right, and just for kids?
Well, that's the hard and challenging part of our jobs. And I think Dr. Clark hit it, that you have to take care of yourself first and set that foundation, because if you're centered and doing what's true, right, and just, every decision you make is through that lens. It's about equity and being focused on our students. If we know our decisions are based on that, we can lay a roadmap out no matter what the circumstances are, because we know we're living in a fluid situation. From day to day, things change, but we have to be centered and feel really good about our decision making and how we work together. So Orange Unified is a large district, 28,000 students, extremely diverse. We have 40 school sites, very different in different parts of cities in Orange County. So our principals are challenged as leaders with not only following a district message, which needs to be uniform, and ensure that we have equity at the forefront of everything we do about meeting students' needs, but at the same time, they have their local community. And so I think, the adaptability is key, and agility, and knowing that, we may send a message out from the district, or we may have plans for our principals who are just coming back this week, actually. They've been on vacation, and I hope they've had a good rest and are ready to leave now. But they need to know that those messages may change in 2 or 3 days, and that I, as the superintendent, working collectively and collaboratively building our partnership with our district office and our schools and the Board of Education, we're going to have to make some tough decisions to maneuver through that. But it's always based on that lens of what is best for students, knowing that our employees also have to feel good every day when they come to work, and they're, in front of the screen, or if we have to pivot to go back to the classroom, they have to feel good that they're trusted, that they're safe, and that their environment is going to be something that they can operate in and meet our students' needs. And it is extremely challenging, but that's what we're here for. I mean, we went into public education to ensure every student had a high quality education, and so we have to be able to operate in this environment.
I'm going to circle back to that topic of navigating the sensitivities during this time, but you said something that triggered me to need to talk to Jeanette. Jeanette, Dr. Hansen described how people behave differently, adults behave differently, so do students, when they feel trust and they feel capable, they feel knowledgeable. Conversely, when teachers or even principals or even district office feels uncomfortable or ill-equipped, they behave in a way that doesn't necessarily put students first. What have you seen in your experience working with schools and districts up and down the state that helps set people's mind at ease, that helps people feel equipped for school opening, which is going to be in 30 days or less?
Definitely making sure that you still have that focus. It doesn't change what we're doing with students. Students always come first, and everyone, I think, has made that point that you have to have a focus. You still need to have your standards if you have alignment, and then moving from there, you need to be able to have common assessments. Those are still important so that you can look at data and still talk about it, and then make decisions and what you will do so that you can meet the needs of every student, so that you are an equity warrior to make sure that everyone gets what they need. The more that you have those things in place and you align, the more comfortable everyone is. I've noticed that the districts that we've worked with that have had those things in place and have had that focus are having a little bit easier move into the distance learning, but not to worry, because you can still do that. If you haven't done that, there are ways to get that focus so that you can move and look and remember the most important thing are the students. And that's what I've seen.
So I hear you. So true. If it's important, count it.
Yes.
With everything else, count something. And it doesn't have to be a test score. It can be feelings, but count something, document it, have a goal, measure it frequently. Pam, your head is falling off your neck. I see you have to speak to us.
Yes, and to everything. Seeing so much of the places where the equity, and I'm going to do this like if I was in person, right? Where and coming back to this conversation about equity, where the effort was put into closing the equity gaps in districts and having relationships with our staffs, with our boards, and our communities that were aligned, and there was that focus on trust building ahead of time, and also a focus on the forward thinking of we're going to make sure we have bandwidth for all of our students, and we're working in partnership with the community before the pandemic, right? Having one-to-one programs. And I have to give a huge shout out to all of the districts and administrators and leaders and teachers who shifted on a dime. We accomplished in 1 month what we have not accomplished in a 10-year time period this past spring.
That's so true. Thank you, Pam. So true.
Which tells us we're capable, right? So when we take a look at, are there still gaps? Is there work? What do we need to do to create that sense of urgency so that, again, things that we have not accomplished in the last 10 to 15 years, what conditions need to be set into place so that within 1 month as a system and as leaders, we can get all on the same page and make it happen on the turn of the dime, because that is a sign of our values.
That's actually a key point. If anybody's taking notes, I would urge you to write this down, to ask this magic question. Whenever you're trying to get somewhere, first, decide what you will count so that you know that you're getting closer. And then in order to decide how to get there, ask yourself this question: under what conditions? Just that. Under what conditions would we be able to get students here? Under what conditions will we be able to get admin here or teachers here? Or just under what conditions? Instead of saying, I wonder if we can, or it'll be so hard, just assume the positive and then figure out how to get it done. What I'd like to do is to ask the superintendents on the panel right now to expose something. And while the true, right, and just is always correct, we can get ourselves into trouble, can't we? If we aren't fully aware of the context. And given the circumstances we face right now, data are interpreted by different people very different ways. It's not so that everybody agrees on what is the right way to do something or what research to pull from. How does a leader move the equity agenda forward, being led by the true north, true, right, and just, equity for all kids, and still be there in the morning to be able to continue the work?
All right, so let me just jump in here. Is one thing that schools just are known for such a long time is this effort around compliance. And so as we're moving into distance learning, we're so focused on getting away from how it was in the spring when we were actually just really forced to dive into this area. And now that we have time to sort of plan it out and to really roll out a robust program, we need to remember not to put so much compliance around everything, but we still have to develop those relationships, provide differentiated support to different students, take in, the environment that our students are currently experiencing into how we actually, deliver instruction. And so I want to make sure that we are careful not just to schedule time just to sort of keep our kids busy by, just having them do, busy work and things of that nature. So there's some sort of compliance, but how can we continue to, with an equity lens, continue to provide our students with experiences? And I'm very confident, that the educators we're working with can see that and can start to really pivot to a less about compliance and more about substance.
Ooh, Dr. Hansen.
Yeah, I really appreciate that reference to compliance versus what I would call quality and a focus on instructional design. I think, as a superintendent of a large, diverse district with we have 1,600 teachers, and our administrators are, they're rock stars. They're working really, really hard. Is you want to provide a foundation, and so we pivoted from the best we could do with online learning, and I think we did fabulous. We had about 98% of our students that were engaged in online last year, but we want 100%, and we want to ensure we have a quality program. So a really great example is the California Department of Education has identified minimum instructional minutes. So for instance, at a high school, it's 240 minutes that we have to come up with teaching strategies online right now. And then if we go into the classroom, how are we going to do it there if we're actually allowed to go back to school? So designing that instructional program is actually critical. The 240 minutes is part of the schedule, but we just have to know that we meet that minimally compliant piece and we take attendance. But the really important work is defining what is going to happen in those 240 minutes. Mm-hmm. And working with the teachers and having instructional leaders that actually say, I expect you to have live instruction, which includes, some form of direct instruction, and then some kind of breakout, small group instruction, differentiated learning to meet the needs of all your students. And then there's going to be an opportunity to do intervention and support struggling students as well. So, you can turn off your camera and work independently with one student while the other group is working. Having those strategies to make it real for students, because I think we did well when we pivoted very quickly. And I like Pam's reference to iterate and lead. Iterate. We do need to iterate and lead. We need to make some changes here and improve the quality of what we did. But with that said, we also have to ensure that we are focused on the main thing, which is not necessarily just having a good, Google Classroom, but it's like, what are you doing in that classroom instructionally with the differentiation and all those strategies? Really, really important.
So
the how of things.
mhm, mhm. That's so interesting. Um, I used to teach admin classes at the university, and I'd often get the question of, my principal did something really good and was removed for it. Or, the superintendent took a bold move and he's no longer there, she's no longer there. And this was my response, and I'd like to hear your reaction. And that is, I'd say, well, you have to be astute. You must have leadership acumen. You cannot be in these leadership positions and be naive. This is a sophisticated enterprise we're in, and whenever you deal with human beings, it gets more and more complex. But if you're led by the true, right, and just, and you make decisions based on that all the time, most of the time it's going to go well. On the time that it doesn't, people will either give you grace if they don't agree with you, because they may question your decision, but they don't question your intentions, or you won't be there in the morning, but someone else will pick you up. However, if you make a decision based on something else, not equity minded, and it doesn't go well, then it'll be a long time before you become a candidate of choice anywhere that really matters. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I would just say that, first of all, I think whether you're a principal and you want your teachers to take risks and to think outside the box, or whether you're a district office administrator, or a superintendent working with the board, is that you have to communicate, right? And so you have to communicate why you're doing certain things, and if if you communicate things out, and if you're clear in your communication, then you can get sort of initial feedback by seeing holes of maybe a plan that you may want to implement, or maybe you want to do a lesson. But if you communicate it out, you're realizing that, oh, this lesson might be a little bit controversial, and maybe I need to redesign how I go about this. But communication is key. And then the other thing, just real quickly, is when we want to when we want to inspire creativity amongst those who we supervise, we have to understand that mistakes are going to be made, and so then we have to model how we treat others on how we want ourselves to be treated if we make if we try something and it doesn't go as intended. So we really want to model what we expect.
Jeanette, let me ask you this. I know that when we train admin, and you do a lot of this, we say your power doesn't come from your position. Your power doesn't come. You don't have power, even a title. In my young days, yesterday, I remember there was a very, very powerful, amazing principal who decided to go back to the classroom. And she was the leader of the administrative association and blah, blah, blah. And I said, what are you doing? Why would you do that? And she said, because she felt that she would have more influence, that she would be able to inspire more, given the conditions of the district at that time as a teacher. So the idea of having power and control and using rules to drive you doesn't seem to be what we're talking about here. How do you see, Jeanette, in working with admin, the importance of being a leader who inspires as opposed to forces or dictates or demands?
Okay. Well, yes, I have. I worked with a lot, and what I've seen is talking a little bit about what Dr. Clark said. Is communicating, but also validating when something's new. You need to validate their feelings. It's scary when you're doing something new that you don't know about. But then you also have to be willing to walk the walk with them. You need to be willing to be right there with them and walking through it with them and saying, I'm here to support. You wouldn't have anyone do anything that you wouldn't do yourself. It's not about me, the leader. It's about what we do together. It's what we do, and really ultimately, again, what's best for the students. And so I've learned and I've seen how that works tremendously, because teachers or whoever you're working with, when they feel validated and they're part of that decision making, then you work as a team.
Right. You know, one of the lines that we use in Shattering Inequities is this: you may not always agree with people. They may not always agree with you, but you speak from the why. You compel. You're a preacher on the mount for the true, right, and just cause. And then in the end, if the decision is one that you cannot live with as a leader in whatever role, then you can say, I want you to want to do this with me. I want you to want to do this with me. Here are the reasons why. And as a leader, I just can't put my head on the pillow at night going in the direction we're going. So I ask you for support in trying this, and we will monitor it, and we will adjust it, iterate, compound as we go, and then we will reevaluate. In the absence of a better plan that adheres to these parameters, let's go in this direction. And if you've had that Dr. Clark, Dr. Hansen sort of vibe to you, where you bring people in, then that almost always works. Pam.
Robin, I would add to that, because what we see is really a very high turnover in our profession, right? In the teaching position, the principal position. The superintendency has an average lifespan of 2.7 years in a district. And there's a reason for that. So at the risk of being a little more controversial and kind of calling out the elephant in the room,
Do it.
there's something else going on here beyond our ability to inspire and to have those conversations and, you know, be able to look ourselves in the mirror and lay down at night. But we have a values disconnect within our society, and it's extreme. And when we do the work, I'm going to go right back to equity again. Right? When we do the work of equity, we can see it happening on our streets right now, right? In the violence that we're seeing, there are attempts at peaceful protests that are being met with violence. And those values carry over into our school systems, into our administrative teams, our teacher teams, into the school boards. And when that values alignment is not matched, there's a space where, as a superintendent, a leader, or a teacher, you're called to either support systemic racism, systemic inequities, or lose your job.
Sometimes.
And we need to be mindful that that is part of it, and to take a stand and say, I cannot live with my own conscience and lead in a system that allows for a certain group of students who have more access to more by the nature of the community values, what their families own and have. If I'm going to say I'm not okay with that, even though that's what the community values, we have to be prepared that we might not be a match, and that we make the difference that we can where we're in that place for the moment, and then serve where we're supposed to serve next to make the difference we're intended to make.
Dr. Hansen, riff off of that, if you will.
Wow, well, that's really powerful. And I think, you know, we all have our moral purpose, and that we have to stay focused on that. And, you know, the job is tough. And, you know, you're talking about superintendents, 2.5 years. Well, I'm going into my fourth. And, you know, it doesn't get easier. It actually gets harder. And leading in terms of the district and working with the Board of Education, I have always said, and believe that our principals feel this way too, that we are going to give our best effort to ensure students get exactly what they need to be successful and meet the needs of our community. So even if I disagree, for instance, with a board member, or I disagree with an approach a principal might be taking, I'm going to be respectful, but I'm going to respectfully disagree. And I'm going to say that our best thinking, and this is what we need to do for students, whether it's a instructional model, it's a decision about, you know, suspensions and disciplines, whatever the data point may be, this is our best thinking on this. And I'm always going to do what's in the best interest of students and public education, because ultimately then I can get up every morning and do my job, knowing that I have that true north and that I'm doing what's best for my organization. And I have had split votes on my board. I have had boards not take my recommendation, but I can go back to my community and I can go back to my teachers and my principals and say, I did my best work and I did what I thought was best for the organization and public education. They may not always agree with me, but that's what I have to do. And I think all leaders need to think from that perspective that, we have a moral purpose and we may not always agree, but we have to have that true north that we're going to do what's best. And I think within the organization, that relationship that you have with your staff and your principals, they need to know that you're going to do that. It's a tough job, but I wouldn't be happy going to work every day and doing what I do if I didn't know that I can make that my value and my point of reference with my team.
And make no mistake, it is not easy and it's subtle.
And Robin, if I could just say one thing on this topic, and I want to recognize CALSA for the work that they do in mentoring, and myself and Dr. Hanson and Pam. I mean, we've been around a long time, and we kind of worked our way up the ranks. But I think when we're working with younger employees, maybe a newer teacher or someone right out of the ranks, and maybe a teacher of color who could be very passionate about some of the things that are going on, and they may not quite understand, how the system needs to change and how it takes time. We want to really work with these individuals to let them know, like, you're more valuable in the position than really like drawing that line, second year in as a teacher. And because as I mean, we face challenges every single day, and there's so many things that we could draw that line on. I mean, it's just endless. However, sometimes, we have to help our younger, people coming up behind us, how to actually navigate, how to, deal with disappointment, but then how to come back even stronger and how to learn from mistakes and how to really understand the system. So again, I think that everything that has been said is so right on, but I just, really felt compelled to kind of add that, because I do know the strong mentoring work that CALSA does, and probably some of those young administrators, young people in the profession are watching this and looking into us, and so much change needs to happen. We need all the people working forward, helping us on this journey.
You're so right about that. I remember being a young administrator and being so clear about what was right and what was wrong, and baffled as what no one else saw it the same way. And over time, that line between right and wrong gets a little more fuzzy, but you do have your red line in the sand.
Yeah.
And you go right up to it, and it does require sophistication. So thank you for reminding us of that. I'm going to ask us to think about one thing, and think for a second, and then I'd like you to give me your one bullet point here. In this area of leadership, what is thinking about what the possible unintended consequences could be moving forward if we get this wrong? What's your one non-negotiable? What's your floor? As a leader, what is it that under which in your leadership will never happen? You can go better, but you can't go below that. In any arena, any aspect of leadership, where's your floor?
Gosh, I'm going to switch that question up a little bit, Robin.
Do that.
You know what I would love to see? I would love to see the unintended consequence of all of this is a massive systems shift in education, and making up something positive come out of this. When we take a look back historically, in 1892, there was the Committee of 10, and that was a group of educators that came together and applied the industrial model to education. We're continuing to live in that model and deliver instruction in that model. If the unintended consequence of our leadership during this time and this massive shift that we're making is that we now apply what we've learned as a result of the technology revolution to education to prepare our students for their future.
Just imagine.
That's my floor.
Great. Okay, someone else. What's your floor?
Well, I would agree with that I've been saying since this horrible pandemic hit us and all the uncertainty that we're challenged with, I would hope that we are at a tipping point in public education, that this crisis would actually move us to a point where we're stronger, that we have a better product for our children. There's a lot of competing forces out there right now. If we don't get this right, if we don't do a really, really good job for our children and our community, right now as we're in this crisis, it's worldwide and it's absolutely coming to a brink here in the United States. If we don't do the most powerful instructional model to support our public school children, I fear that the future won't be what we expect it to be. We are at a tipping point, and I totally agree that we have an opportunity to transform out of this crisis into an even stronger public educational system. And so all of our leaders need to really think about what their impact is in this crisis in terms of if we hit this really hard and we do really well and we listen to our community and we work together, we can actually transform. And I agree, the industrial model of, the master schedule at a high school that is the holy grail of how we operate. I mean, we need to blow that up and we need to start over and we need to start thinking about what kids need and not just the, 1 through 6 period of, the schedule that's there rather than, getting to know each student and understanding their specific learning needs.
Thank you, Dr.
So,
Hanson.
so again, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with Pam and Dr. Hanson exactly with what they said. But along with that, something that is sort of my non-negotiable and is my floor is blame. When we blame kids and we blame families and we blame employees, then it's so hard to move forward when we're pointing fingers and blaming. We all have a responsibility here. It's everyone's, it's everyone's issue or everyone's opportunity. And so to point fingers and to blame, is something that I just have very little patience for.
Ooh, that's
Amen.
profound. Jeanette,
Well,
what's your
my
floor?
story is that we don't accept failure in any area whatsoever. No group of students, no group of teachers, nothing. And under what conditions, I can't say that enough, what conditions do we need to put in place so that every group of students are successful? So whatever this opportunity that we have, we take it to the limit and we make it the best. So if something doesn't work, then let's try something else. So under what conditions? Because we're not accepting failure in anything.
Thank you, Jeanette. Wow. Chris, what can I say?
Has it already been almost an hour? My goodness. Again, this is my favorite hour of the week, and it has been my favorite hour in July. And everyone who's attending today and all of those who are watching now or after the fact, you're looking at CALSA. These are our friends. These are leaders that are committed. We are a diverse group of educational leaders committed to supporting the students of California and beyond. Thank you so much for all the wisdom that you provided and the responses. We do have a couple of questions that I'd like to get to, if you don't mind, and two in particular that are really powerful. And those who we don't get to, our friends at Orenda are filming some responses to the questions, and you'll be able to see those online. They are very well done with engaging leaders like Robin and the team from Orenda. And so if we don't get to your question right now, look forward to us answering the question afterwards. But what I wanted to ask the panelists is, how do we ensure equity in our schools? How are you measuring it, and what's the accountability for making sure equity is a priority?
I just wanted to say, I think it was spoken earlier about, what you expect is what you measure. And so when we say equity, I think we have to be very specific about what type of equity are we talking about. Are we talking equity with resources? Are we talking instructional equity? Are we talking behavioral equity? Things of that nature. So I think the best way is to be crystal clear on what part of the equity lens are you expecting, and then measure it.
That's it.
I'd like to add to that, Dr. Clark. When we talk about equity, we do have very different definitions, and we use one word, and it's a buzzword right now. And an activity that is really good to do with your teaching staff, principals, board members, community, is to say, everybody write down what equity means to you. And put folks in a small group and have them share what equity means. And then ask that group that has consensus on that first round to stand up. And what we're going to find is nobody stands up because we have such different definitions of equity. So first and foremost, having to plus one, Dr. Clark, a definition of equity that we agree on within our district, our schools, and our community, and that the board agrees on, and that defines what we're measuring.
Right. I have to jump in here, and I'll just do a visual. As you know, if you don't know, this is the most important thing about me. I was drill team captain of the Belmont Sentinel Swinging Sweethearts, Belmont High School. So I do things with gestures, but I can show you a graph that looks like this. And each line, here we go, each line represents a different group. And if I tell you one is white Anglo students and the other one is African American or Latino students, and the lines go like this, can you predict which group is assigned to which line? Of course you can. And it'll always be 25 or 30 points difference, no matter what we measure. So that's inequity. Let me show you equity. Equity is when those two lines meet, when you can no longer predict what group is assigned to what line based on the group they represent. That's equity in whatever the indicator is. X marks the spot, hashtag or something like that. Well, I just have to throw that in. Chris.
Yes. Another question coming from the group. We have some new administrators, and this particular topic is leadership and unintended consequences. I've heard a couple brilliant nuggets from our panelists, but if you could, each panelist, just give one or two focused efforts, pieces of advice that you would give to a new principal or a new administrator coming into a new position. And Dr. Clark, you're the new leader of Mount Diablo. What advice do you give to new leaders in this time right now?
Excellent question.
First of all, and then I'll quickly turn it over to Dr. Hansen because she didn't get a chance to respond to equity. But my advice to a new leader is to focus on culture, to really learn and understand the culture that you're walking into. Because if you don't understand culture, you're going to have a tough time doing anything. The next piece of advice that I would give is, obviously they're already connected with CALSA, connect with CASA, connect with CCEE, and those are organizations that will help you in pushing forward support for all students.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Dr. Hansen.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I think as a new administrator, one of the most important things that you can do is to actually connect with a mentor. There's groups like this, CALSA, that will assist you in finding someone that is in a similar situation or has lived through, an assignment like you might be taking on your new assignment. So having a mentor and someone to talk to when you're in situations is absolutely critical. And then also to work closely to have a thought partner within your organization that maybe is a experienced principal or assistant principal. I'm thinking about doing this. What are your thoughts on that? And then just the next thing would be, don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think you do need to know the culture of your organization, but no leader advances in their position unless they're willing to do some things different. And that requires a little bit of risk taking and trust yourself. Verify what you're doing, talk to people, but always trust yourself. If you're focused on children and you're doing the best work, take some risks. Don't be afraid of that. You can make mistakes. I always say to, the people that I mentor and talk to, you make a mistake, that's not a problem. If you keep making the same mistake over and over, that's the problem. But, it's okay to make a mistake here and there because you're actually probably learning and you're growing as a leader when that happens.
Wonderful. Anyone else on the panel want to add to that?
They don't take things personally. Taking it personally can just suck out our heart and soul and take away your energy to do the leadership work that you need to do. So when there's pushback, right, there may be a different agenda. It may be that you did make a mistake, but don't take it personally. Don't let it eat at you. Learn, as Dr. Marie was saying, learn and hold your head high and keep moving forward, and have your cheerleading team in place to support you, to give you that energy.
And I would say, it's not about you. It's about working as a team. It's more as you working with people and all the things that you said, but always remember, it's not about you personally.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, there you have it, Chris. Might I take us to summarize a little bit this series, so to speak? This has been a fascinating hour. You know, we've all heard the expression in some form or another, those who fail to learn from the past are doomed to repeat it, and there's different versions of it. What we might be surprised to know is that it was a philosopher named George Santayana who actually authored that aphorism, and it sort of took off in politics. I think it's interesting to note that he's Spanish born and his real name is Jorge Agustín Nicolás Ruiz de Santayana de Borrás. I just thought I would tell you that. It's a little trivia for your next cocktail party, virtual. But what that talks about is, what I want to say is the best leaders don't look 1 foot in front of us. We have to look way down the line. And way down the line are unintended consequences. And let me just give you some concrete examples. Was anyone around during class size reduction? Great idea. Anything go wrong with that? Besides the fact that it didn't improve achievement. And there are lots of reasons for that. Does anybody remember having academies and small schools and houses in high schools? Any tracking that ended up happening out of that? De facto tracking? It exacerbated inequities already there. Sometimes you go so far this way, you end up further on the other side. Or what about PLCs? Anybody have meetings in search of a purpose? And it landed in contracts. Here are meetings, they can't be touched by admin, agendas have to be done this way and that way. The point is, an equity warrior, an equity champion leader needs to learn that the best possible idea can't have unintended consequences, and it probably will. And the antidote to that is to count something. Determine what equity is that you want to, like Dr. Clark said, what is it, what aspect of equity are you going to try and cross? And what are you going to count and measure to see how close you get? And as long as you keep your eye on those counts, then you will know sooner rather than later, before it's too late. And before, you know, something that will take another generation to fix happens. So I would like to ask all of us to join communities of equity warriors like CALSA, who stay focused no matter what, because it's lonely. Sometimes you feel all alone and sometimes you are, but you're really not. And to stay focused on the true, right, and just, with wisdom, sophistication, and acumen. And with that, this idea of under what conditions can we have fairness in the system for all kids can really get us to the place that we've always wanted to go. So with that, Chris, I leave this summer camp with my heart sad and heavy and hopeful at the same time.
No, thank you so much, Robin. You are a true friend of the organization, a true equity warrior. And even though we've spent 5 weeks together, your work continues with school districts up and down the state. Excellent evidence-based research-backed work. And we encourage everyone on the panel and everyone attending today to look at Orenda and consider the work that they're doing. I want to thank our panelists, everybody for being members of CALSA. I agree, Dr. Clark, we need to be members of several organizations, including CASA, including CALSA, and including our friends at CUE. Pam and her organization have done incredible work in supporting the leaders throughout California. They have a fall CUE coming up. We encourage you to look at that. We encourage you to attend. And CALSA is going to continue to do these webinars with great leaders throughout the state, and we look forward to seeing you at a future webinar. We also just invite you to join CALSA. We invite you to join the Familia. It is a diverse group of educational leaders really focused on the majority of students in California and all students. And we want to advance each other. We want to grow leaders. We want to mentor the next generation.